As a kid, a keen sense of déjà vu could grip me. I never knew when. Tendrils of the past would come pestering, pulling back. It was like being haunted, which is why I hated history and still find it averse.
In the mountains where we lived, history was a wicked devil, one our people called Distrux. On a whim, the fiend could lash out, spear a deadly coil through your life. Signs of its villainy were everywhere. Earthquakes and avalanches, rock slides, failing walls, falling roofs. Our men were hard rock miners. On entering the mines, they had to kneel at Distrux's altar to show respect, each lighting a candle, hoping the devil wouldn't turn vengeful before venturing down a tunnel. I saw that devil once, after a miner died, barred his way into the underworld. It sat robed in a thick coat of wax, a huge hulking mass of rock, like a giant blocking the middle of a passage. From that night on, whenever my folks fought or when talk turned dark and gloomy, Distrux's tendrils would reach out of the night into my dreams and pursue me. Then I got lucky. Mom left Dad and took me with her, down out of the mountains, through the foothills, to a beautiful valley in the forest where Grandma lived. Granny kept a garden, and come spring, being no help, I was free to roam. Oh, how I learned to love those wooded hills and shady streams. By day my adventures so enwrapped me that by night a lush greenness re-enwrapped my dreams. There, in those fertile fields, history took a gentler name, Girona. Evenings, by firelight, Granny would open her Bible and teach me words that spoke of that goddess's nature. So I, too, very soon fell under the spell of her rapture. Reading, on my own, I found Girona had an evil twin, Deluan, a demon, of whom no one ever spoke. Deluan and Girona waged war, and while not so vicious as Distrux, Deluan was a villain, especially come the rainy season, when his torrents surged downriver. So even there, midst that gentle richness, history had an ugly side. Come fall, as stream beds widened, roads crumbled. As riverbanks wore away, bridges fell. That's when our food ran low, and we turned to the Ripa to trade goods for succor. Their village was upriver, built on piles, safe on our side. And though at first what they said seemed impenetrable, we found them to be a fair, honest people. Visiting, playing with their children gradually lent me a sense of their language, and how they venerated the world, which they called Gaia, the spirit of which they pointed out in the bluffs above us as we played, where Terra was cut through, battered and scarred by history's ongoing battles. That's where the Ripa would gather for ritual dance and sing their solemn cant. As I listened and gazed up, the prismic play of twilight evoked an intuitive sense of nascent clarity. Myriad multiples, hundreds, thousands of facets resolved into subtle shade, foreshadowing end of day. 6 seasons passed. Then an uncle came and took me, a day's ride out of the forest over open prairie range, to study in a communal school and work on his ranch and grange. Thus began a rigorous routine, morning tasks, then school, then back for more bothersome chores. Crops to tend, kindling to chop, animals to feed, and from horizon to horizon, fences to mend. The cycle seemed never-ending, except each fortnight when the wicked were called to pray. and I was taught a different way of paying respect, not to history per se, but to its master, the one, his holy church, his living body called Father. Following his path, I was told, no matter how tortured or twisted, leads to eternal afterlife. His teachings were never doubted, so my questions were taken as reckless, feckless perfidy, which is why I turned stubbornly, studiously bookish. After school, after chores, after dinner and dishes were done, I'd light a lamp and head straight from my room to feed the feeble flicker of clarity what fodder I'd found. A second summer passed when a woman in a wagon arrived, a great aunt I'd never met. So getting bundled into her surrey made me upset. There followed a long, bumpy ride off the high plateau, down to a valley town, where I moved into her marvelous house. With an icebox, indoor plumbing, electric lights, telephones, radios, clocks, and whatnots. Her little town bustled with buggies and motor cars and trucks on nearly every route. School was busier too, full of noisy, pushy kids all crowded about, but the library offered me an oasis. So come lunch or recess, that's where I'd go, and search out writers who kept the colors of clarity aglow. Even better, at home I stayed up late reading, every night, except one, that is. For each week we went to temple, where I was taught sacred preachings of a greater God, or should I say, the God. For all who gathered there believed themselves lesser souls of an all-pervasive spirit. 2 years passed, then my aunt confided she'd had word. There was nothing left that their school had to teach me. So with a teary-eyed kiss, she surrendered me to her elder son, who took me downriver, one day's run, to a port city, where I moved in with his wife and boys. Their suburban estate filled with an astonishing array of electronic games and toys. My cousin was a respected scholar at a venerated divinity school, in which we students were subject to rote religious rule. Coupling that with the pedantic pedagogy of a stoic priestly caste, their lessons spoken in an ancient language from millennia past, plus a course of studies broken by so much teasing, I grew tenser with the passage of each class. But from that stress, my cousin saved me, offering an alternative. A solitary way around religious vagary, a meditative means of contemplating its degree of spiritual sophistry. So in weaving together the ambiguous hues of theosophy, I learned to appreciate ever more facets of clarity. Acting as my tutor, my mentor, my muse, he found me a cubicle, a cloister, a library niche in which I built an etymological citadel, a wall of books sussed of arcana, figuratively arranged from nature's least to its most generative metrics. A literary fortress, its quantitative bricks reinforced with qualitative mortar. My matriculation kept accelerating, till once again I boarded a ship and headed downriver, only on my own, alone, eclipsing my family tree, mesmerized by how those once smooth waters now are bounded with delights. Bow waves parting, dispersing, and in rebounding, diffusing, shot through by clashing caustics, shocked with shimmering sprites. That voyage ended on a delta, in a busy port city where a new way of life began, when I achieved autonomy, at the expense of sharing a walk-up flat with an upperclassman. A junior fledgling assigned to be my docent, my learned steed, my stead, a guide meant to shepherd me through the plenty ahead. And college was like that, like a scholastic candy store. Abundance burst forth in a cornucopia of curricula. Gain enough credit, and I could sample it all.
from the saccharine smoothness of an introductory course to the concentrated richness of an upper-level one that gets to the nut of a topical source. Campus was divided into 5 trigons, like a pie, with the outermost crusted-over arc of each the conservative retreat of Emeritus Ardens, and each wedge thereafter concentrated by the youthful congress of its students, especially close in, where a core of urbane sophisticates spiced up debate on the floor. That central vitality launched my first flight of fancy out to humanity, to study folklore's compounding of mysticism and philosophy through history. This opened up the metaphysics of epistemics, stripping away my sallow solipsism, which winnowed the ethics of values down to axiomatic adjudication. Hence, the archness of linguistic inculcation led me into Gödelian logic. That cast me out across campus into formal science, to work out the statistical nature of grammatical data, the computation of which pointed out a macro path through probabilistic math into the physics of signaling systems. Thereafter, the micromechanics of recycling and dissipation led through cybernetics into natural science and the abstract theory of homeostatic operation. From there, organic chemistry pointed up the autopoiesis of life's recursive pattern. Thus, by way of dovetailing paths, I kept zeroing in on generative proactive matters. Thereafter, the unique efficacy of complex adaptive systems led me into social science, which is to say, a need to find a graduate school where I could research the bioethics of behavioral compliance as applied science. One night soon after, I boarded ship and left port, sailing into darkness, then total blackness for hours on end, till a pale corona arose across the bay, one that kept arcing higher hour after hour. Then within the glow, a flicker appeared, growing into a glimmer, then a shimmer that became a spire, one set afire as it rose ever higher, a blaze atop a crown of diamonds on the far shore. The closer we sailed, the more I fell stunned, my petty conceits falling nigh unto oblivion. For as ever more light surged up from below, renewed brilliance burst aglow. As each new tier of the city came clear, its pluralized radiance muted its last, secreting all prior amperage in an occult cast, dizzily skewing its towers, tilting them vertical, floating akimbo, then in limbo, detached. My quixotic pursuit took me up into an ever more modernized maze of municipal tiers, to an academy devoted exclusively to symbolic science, to study the extemporary complexities of increasingly localized chronologies, which is to say, the abject dubiety of unknown knowns, the confabulation of what we know by what really isn't so. Pursuing that bias exposed me to the constructal laws of operative identity, the egocentric speciestic guile of our invasive sympatry, and running below those interpretive hermeneutics, an inchoate possibility, a new means of modeling psychometric pragmatics, one incipient enough to get at the underlying heuristic, exposing the provincial adjudication of partisan justification. And so the task ahead is simple. I've got to pull what I've learned into a coherent thesis. My job's to illustrate how each individual personifies our inventive genius, show how each endeavor shines a fresh light on identity. I've got to concentrate on the spontaneous impetus of creativity. And to do that, I've got to show how the situational structure of originality works. Make its presence density facile, clear, easy to see. A non-ça-non, benefiting each occasion as one at once.